Imagine the happiest day of my life standing in a quaint chapel, vows exchanged under soft light, my heart swelling with joy. But as I glanced at the empty pews reserved for family, a cold dread crept in. No parents, no siblings, not even a call. They couldn't make it, the text read later like an afterthought. I forced a smile for my new husband, whispering, "They're just busy." Deep down, I knew they chose not to come. It was the first cut in a lifetime of favoritism where my sister was the golden child, and I was the forgotten one. Weeks later, the wound still raw, Mom called. "We need 5,000 for your sister's birthday bash, make it special like family should." My blood boiled. We'd scraped together every penny for our wedding, and they skipped it. Selfish. She spat when I hesitated. Memories flooded years of me footing bills, covering debts, always the reliable one they exploited. No more. I wired exactly $1 with a note, "Best wishes," a tiny act of defiance that set my soul free. But freedom came with fury. Harsh texts poured in, public shaming on social media. I changed the locks, blocked their numbers, drawing a line in the sand. Then one rainy night, blue lights flashed outside. Cops at my door accusing me of elder neglect. My own mother had filed a false report, twisting the knife deeper. What followed was a whirlwind of deceit, fraud, and courtroom battles that exposed their darkest secrets. Stick around. You won't believe the shocking twists, the heart-wrenching revelations, and the sweet ultimate revenge that left me standing tall. This isn't just a story of betrayal. It's proof that sometimes the smallest spark ignites the biggest fire. And oh, the satisfaction at the end. It's worth every second. My name is Sarah Collins, 34 years old, a high school English teacher in a small Ohio town. I grew up as the middle child in a family that always seemed to shine its spotlight on my older sister Laura, leaving me to linger in the shadows. Teaching gave me purpose, a way to pour love into students the way I wished my family had for me. But nothing prepared me for the sting of their absence on the day I needed them most. The chapel smelled of lilies and wax, the kind of scent that clings to your skin and memory. It was my wedding day, a moment I'd dreamed of since I was a girl, sketching dresses in my diary. My white gown hugged my frame, simple but elegant. And my fiancé, Tom, stood at the altar, his grin wide enough to light the dim room. We'd planned a small ceremony, just 30 guests to keep it intimate and affordable. The wooden pews gleamed under the soft glow of stained glass windows, each seat carefully reserved with handwritten name cards. I'd spent hours curling the edges of those cards, imagining my parents' proud smiles, my sister's teasing laughter, even my younger brother's awkward hug. But as I walked down the aisle, clutching a bouquet of daisies, my heart sank. The pews marked family were empty. Not a single relative had shown up. Tom's hand found mine warm and steady as the officiant's voice carried through the quiet. I forced a smile, nodding through the vows, but my eyes kept darting to those vacant seats. My parents, Ellen and Robert, had promised to be there. Laura, always the center of their world, swore she'd clear her schedule. Even my brother Tim, usually too shy to commit, had said I wouldn't miss it. Yet here I was, surrounded by Tom's cousins and our closest friends. Their chatter a faint hum against the ache in my chest. I told myself they were just late traffic maybe, or some last-minute emergency. The lie felt flimsier with every passing minute. After the ceremony, we gathered in the church hall for a modest reception. Paper lanterns swayed above tables draped in white linen, and a playlist of Tom's favorite jazz filled the air. I laughed as he spun me across the makeshift dance floor, but the joy felt brittle like glass ready to crack. My phone stayed silent. No missed calls. No apologies. As the evening wound down, I slipped away to check my messages, hoping for something, anything. There it was, a single text from my mother sent just minutes ago. "Sorry couldn't make it. Hope it was nice." 8 words, cold and careless, like a note left on a fridge. No explanation, no warmth. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button, but no words came. The hurt was too deep, too familiar. Tom found me in the corner, his brow furrowed. "Sarah, you okay?" he asked, his voice soft but searching. I showed him the text and he pulled me close, his arms a shield against the world. "They don't deserve you," he murmured, but his words couldn't erase the truth I'd known for years. This wasn't forgetfulness or bad timing. My family hadn't forgotten my wedding, they'd chosen not to come. The realization settled like a stone in my stomach, heavy and unyielding. I thought of the times I'd been their afterthought, the birthdays they skipped, the graduations they forgot, always with Laura's achievements stealing the spotlight. This time, though, it cut deeper. This was my wedding, the day I'd poured my heart into, and they dismissed it without a second thought. Back at the reception, I pasted on another smile, cutting cake and toasting with friends. But inside, I was unraveling. I kept picturing my mother's face, her dismissive wave when I'd asked her to confirm the date. "We'll be there." "Sarah, don't fuss," she'd said. My father, always quiet, had nodded along his eyes, avoiding mine. Laura had laughed it off, saying she was swamped but would try. Try. The word echoed, now hollow and mocking. I glanced at the hope necklace around my neck, a delicate silver chain my father had given me when I was 10. For my dreamer, he'd said, then, his smile rare but genuine. I'd worn it today, believing it might tether me to them, but it felt like a lie now, too. As Tom and I drove home that night, the silence between us was heavy. He reached for my hand, sensing the storm inside me. "They'll regret this, Sarah," he said, his voice firm. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying that text, those empty pews. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, that they'd show up tomorrow with apologies and hugs, but deep down I knew better. This wasn't just absence, it was betrayal, the kind that lingers like a bruise. And as I stared out the car window, the chapel fading in the distance, a question burned in my chest. What if their busyness was just the beginning of a deeper deception? 3 days after my wedding, the sting of those empty pews still lingered like a bruise I couldn't stop pressing. Tom and I had settled into our modest Ohio apartment, sorting through gifts and thank you notes, trying to savor the glow of our new life together. I was 34, an English teacher who found solace in grading essays and encouraging shy students. But the absence of my family, my parents, Ellen and Robert, my sister Laura, and even my quiet brother Tim, cast a shadow over every moment. I kept replaying Mom's curt text. "Sorry, couldn't make it. Hope it was nice." I wanted to let it go, to focus on Tom's steady love, but the hurt clung to me, heavy and familiar. That morning, I stood at our kitchen counter sipping coffee while Tom flipped pancakes, his humming a soft anchor in the quiet. The mail slot clattered and I shuffled to the door, expecting another late wedding card from a colleague. Instead, I found a single envelope, pale pink, with elegant cursive spelling out my name. My heart lifted for a moment. Maybe this was their apology, a gesture to mend what they'd broken. But as I tore it open, a glossy postcard slipped out and my breath caught. It was a birthday card for Laura, her name in bold gold letters with a handwritten note. "Let's celebrate as a real family." Below, a photo was tucked inside, showing Mom, Dad and Laura beaming at a candlelit dinner table, balloons floating behind them. The date stamp on the photo hit me like a slap. It was taken the same day as my wedding. I sank onto the couch, the card trembling in my hands. The image burned into me, Mom's proud smile as she leaned toward Laura, Dad's hand on her shoulder, their laughter frozen in time. They hadn't just skipped my wedding. They'd thrown a party for Laura instead, as if my day meant nothing. The timing of the card's arrival felt deliberate, a cruel jab to remind me of my place or lack of one in their world. I traced the edges of the photo, my mind racing back to childhood. Laura's dance recitals always trumped my school plays. Her graduations were family events, while mine were met with excuses. I'd spent years convincing myself it was normal, that I was too sensitive. But this was different. This was a calculated wound delivered through the mail slot of my new life. Tom noticed my silence and crossed the room, his brow creasing. "Sarah, what's wrong?" he asked, kneeling beside me. I handed him the card without a word, my throat too tight to speak. He studied the photo, his jaw tightening, and then pulled me into his arms. "You deserve so much better than this," he said, his voice low and fierce. "They don't get to treat you like this." His words were a lifeline, but they couldn't drown out the ache. I didn't cry out of rage, not yet. It was the weight of being overlooked again and again that brought tears to my eyes. They spilled, silently soaking into Tom's shirt as he held me. I wasn't angry. I was exhausted by the familiar pain of being the afterthought, the one who didn't count. I set the card on the coffee table, its cheerful design mocking me. Laura's birthday was in 2 days, and this card wasn't meant for me. It was sent to rub salt in the wound. I pictured Mom writing it, her pen gliding with casual cruelty, knowing it would arrive just after my wedding. Did she think I wouldn't notice the date? Or worse, did she want me to? I remembered the times I'd tried to win their approval, staying up late to help Laura with her college applications, lending money for Dad's car repairs, always hoping for a scrap of their affection. But this postcard with its smiling faces and deliberate timing was proof they didn't just forget me. They chose Laura as always and left me to pick up the pieces. I stood wiping my eyes and walked to the window. The street outside was quiet, the early autumn leaves skittering across the pavement. Tom joined me, his hand resting on my shoulder. "We're your family now," he said softly, and I nodded, wanting to believe it. But the hurt was a knot in my chest, tightening with every thought of that photo. I didn't want to hate them, but the postcard felt like more than a slight. It was a declaration that I didn't belong. I tucked it away in a drawer, unable to throw it out, as if keeping it might help me understand their cruelty. I told myself I'd move on, that I'd focus on my new life with Tom. But as I glanced at the drawer, a chill ran through me. That photo held a clue I hadn't yet uncovered, a hint of something darker waiting to surface. The postcard with Laura's beaming face still haunted me, tucked away in a drawer, but burning in my mind like a brand. It had been a week since my wedding, and I was trying to settle into the rhythm of married life with Tom in our cozy Ohio apartment. At 34, I'd built a steady career as a high school English teacher, finding joy in shaping young minds. But the sting of my family's absence and that cruel birthday card kept me restless. I wanted to bury the hurt, to focus on the future, but it clung to me, a shadow I couldn't shake. That afternoon, I was grading papers at the kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the window when my phone buzzed. Mom's name flashed on the screen and my stomach twisted. I hadn't heard from her since her dismissive text after the wedding, and part of me hoped this was the apology I'd been craving. I answered, my voice cautious. "Sarah." She began, her tone syrupy, the kind she used when she wanted something. "We're planning something special for Laura's birthday. A big party, the kind she deserves. You can help out, right? We need about $5,000 to make it perfect." The number hit me like a punch. Tom and I had scraped every penny for our wedding, eating into our savings for a day my family didn't even bother to attend. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. "Mom, we just paid for the wedding," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We don't have that kind of money lying around." Her pause was heavy, deliberate. "Sarah, don't be selfish." She snapped, her sweetness gone. "Laura's worked so hard, and this is her moment. You've always been the one we count on. Don't let us down now." The word selfish sliced through me, sharp and familiar. I sat there, the phone pressed to my ear, as memories flooded back, years of being the family's financial crutch. When Laura needed a new laptop for college, I covered it, dipping into my part-time job savings. When Dad's truck broke down, I sent $2,000, skipping a vacation I'd planned. Even as a teenager, I'd handed over babysitting money to help with Laura's dance lessons, always with Mom's voice in my ear. Family sacrifices, Sarah. But the sacrifices were always mine, never theirs. I stared at the stack of essays on the table, the red pen trembling in my hand. This wasn't just about money, it was about control, about keeping me tethered to their demands. I saw Laura's face in that photo, smiling at a party they'd thrown while I walked down the aisle alone. They hadn't even asked how my day went, but now they wanted $5,000 for her special birthday. The audacity of it sparked something new in me, a flicker of defiance. "Mom, I can't," I said, my voice firm for the first time. "We're starting our life. You'll have to figure it out." Her response was instant venomous. "You've always been so ungrateful," she hissed. "Laura would never do this to us." The call ended with a click, leaving me in silence, her words echoing like a slap. I set the phone down, my heart pounding. Tom walked in carrying groceries and caught the look on my face. "What happened?" he asked, setting the bags down. I told him about Mom's call to demand her accusation. His eyes darkened, but he kept his voice gentle. "You did the right thing, Sarah. You're not their bank." I nodded, but the weight of her words lingered. Selfish. Ungrateful. They were labels I'd worn for years, always trying to prove them wrong by giving more, doing more. I thought back to the time I'd skipped buying a new coat to send money for Laura's prom dress, only to hear Mom praise her for looking like a star. My own prom I'd worn a thrift store, find no one noticing. Or the Christmas I worked double shifts to help with Dad's medical bills, only for Laura to get a new car that spring paid for by family savings I'd never seen. Sitting there, I realized this was more than a request for money. It was a leash one they'd used to keep me in line my whole life. Every dollar I'd given had bought me nothing but their indifference, while Laura basked in their adoration. The postcard's image flashed in my mind, their laughter a silent taunt. I wasn't just tired of it. I was done. For the first time, I felt a spark of resolve, a need to break free from their guilt trips. I looked at Tom, his steady gaze grounding me. "I'm not doing it anymore," I said, more to myself than to him. "No more bailing them out." He squeezed my hand, a quiet promise of support. But as I lay in bed that night, the silence of our apartment felt too still, like the calm before a storm. Mom's voice, sharp with accusation, replayed in my head. I'd said no, but I knew my family too well, they wouldn't let this go. Laura's birthday was days away, and their demand for $5,000 wasn't just about a party. It was a test, one I'd failed in their eyes. As I stared at the ceiling, a chill settled over me. Little did I know refusing would unleash a storm I couldn't predict. The sting of Mom's accusations, selfish, ungrateful, still echoed in my ears days after her call demanding $5,000 for Laura's birthday. I was 34, an English teacher in our quiet Ohio town, and I'd spent years bending to my family's demands, always hoping for their approval. But that night, lying awake beside Tom, I'd made a vow no more. Their absence at my wedding and that cruel postcard had cracked something open in me, and Mom's latest guilt trip was the final straw. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was ready to fight back in my own way. It was a crisp Saturday morning, a week after the call, and Laura's birthday was tomorrow. Tom and I sat at our kitchen table, the scent of brewing coffee mixing with the faint chill seeping through the window. I stared at my laptop, the banking app open on the screen. Mom's words replayed in my mind, her voice sharp, expecting me to cave as always. I thought of the years I'd emptied my savings for them, $2,000 for Dad's truck, $1,500 for Laura's college fees. Countless smaller sums for family emergencies that always seemed to benefit my sister. Each time I'd swallowed the resentment, telling myself it was what families did. But now, with the memory of those empty wedding pews, and Laura's smug smile in that postcard photo, I felt something new, a spark of defiance, bright and unyielding. I typed in the transfer details, my fingers steady. Not $5,000, not even close. $1. Exactly $1 wired to Mom's account with a memo that read, "Best wishes." I hit send before I could second-guess myself, a grin spreading across my face. It wasn't about the money, it was about reclaiming my voice. For the first time, I wasn't begging for their love or apologizing for existing. I was saying loud and clear that I was done being their doormat. The screen confirmed the transfer, and a weight lifted from my shoulders like I'd shed a heavy coat I'd worn too long. I leaned back, the chair creaking under me, and felt a rush of relief. Their disapproval, the fear of their judgment, it didn't own me anymore. Tom walked in, wiping his hands on a dish towel, his brow raised at my expression. "What's got you smiling like that?" he asked, leaning against the counter. I turned the laptop toward him, showing the transaction. His eyes widened, then he burst out laughing, a deep, warm sound that filled the room. "Sarah, you really did it," he said, shaking his head. "That's my girl." He pulled me into a hug, his arms solid and reassuring. "You're not just standing up for yourself, you're rewriting the rules." His pride in me felt like a warm blanket wrapping around the part of me that had always craved validation. For years I'd lived in fear of Mom's sharp tongue, Dad's silent nods, Laura's entitled demands. But in that moment, with Tom's laughter echoing and that $1 transfer complete, I felt free, like I'd finally stepped out of their shadow. I spent the rest of the day buzzing with a quiet energy. I graded papers with a focus I hadn't had in weeks, the red pen moving swiftly across my students' essays. I caught myself humming as I washed dishes, the hope necklace around my neck glinting in the kitchen light. That necklace, a gift from Dad when I was a girl, had once symbolized my longing for their love. Now it felt like a reminder of my own strength, a talisman of the woman I was becoming. I didn't need their approval to know my worth. I had Tom, our home, my students, a life I'd built despite them. The dollar wasn't just a jab. It was a declaration that I was no longer the Sarah who'd bend to their whims. As evening fell, Tom and I curled up on the couch, a movie playing softly in the background. I felt lighter, like I'd crossed a threshold I couldn't uncross. But beneath that relief, a small part of me wondered how they'd react. Would Mom call furious? Would Laura laugh it off as she always did? I pushed the thoughts away, focusing on Tom's hand in mine, the warmth of our apartment. I told myself it didn't matter what they thought anymore. I'd made my stand, and it felt good, better than good. It felt like power, quiet, but unshakable. Yet as we sat there, the glow of the TV casting shadows on the walls, I couldn't shake a nagging feeling. That $1 wasn't just a message, it was a spark, and I'd lit it in a family that thrived on control. I glanced at my phone, silent for now, but something told me the quiet wouldn't last. But that single dollar was about to ignite a family backlash I never expected. The thrill of sending that single dollar still buzzed in my veins, a quiet rebellion that felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I was 34, an English teacher in our small Ohio town, and for once I'd stood up to my family's endless demands. Tom's laughter and support had bolstered my resolve, but as the days passed, a nagging unease settled in. I knew my mother Ellen and sister Laura too well. They didn't let defiance go unanswered. That Saturday night, as I curled up with Tom watching a movie, I had no idea their retaliation was already brewing, ready to spill into the open. The next morning, I woke to a flood of notifications on my phone. My heart sank as I opened social media and saw Laura's post pinned at the top of her profile, public for all our small town to see. "Some people think $1 can replace family," it read, followed by a photo of the bank transfer confirmation, my sarcastic best wishes note glaring in bold. She went on her words, dripping with venom. "While we're planning a charity event to support our struggling family, others turn their backs. Shame on you." The post had dozens of likes, comments from distant cousins and old neighbors. Some pitying Laura, others questioning my character. My cheeks burned as I scrolled each comment, a needle in my pride. Then, I saw the event link, a community fundraiser at the local church hall, supposedly to help our family in need. The implication was clear: they were painting me as the neglectful daughter who'd abandoned them. I clicked the event page, my hands trembling. Laura had organized a small gathering, potluck style, with a donation jar for family support. The description was vague but deliberate, hinting at a daughter who'd walked away from her responsibilities. A photo accompanied it, one I hadn't seen in years. Me as a teenager smiling awkwardly beside Laura at a family picnic. Seeing my younger self used to sell their lie made my stomach churn. They weren't just mocking my dollar. They were twisting my name into a story of betrayal for the whole town to judge. I pictured Laura at the church hall, her charm turned on full blast, collecting sympathy and donations while casting me as the villain. It was a masterstroke of manipulation, the kind she'd perfected over years of being the golden child. By noon, my phone buzzed with texts from mutual friends. "Sarah, is everything okay?" asked Jenny, a former classmate who'd attended our wedding. I saw Laura's post, "What's going on?" Another message from a colleague at school was blunter. "Did you really send just $1? That's cold." Each question felt like a spotlight exposing me to scrutiny I hadn't invited. I walked to the living room where Tom was reading the paper and showed him the post. His jaw tightened as he read, his fingers gripping the phone. "They're trying to humiliate you," he said, his voice low. "This isn't about money, it's about control." He was right. Laura's post wasn't just a jab. It was a public execution of my reputation designed to pull me back into their orbit through shame. I wanted to fire back, to post a defense explaining their absence at my wedding, the years of being their financial crutch. But as I stared at the screen, the comments piling up, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Engaging would only fuel their drama, give them the reaction they craved. I'd spent my life trying to prove I wasn't the selfish daughter they labeled me, but no more. "I'm not responding," I told Tom, setting the phone down. "Let them talk. Silence is cheaper than their game." He nodded, pride flickering in his eyes. "You're stronger than they'll ever know," he said, pulling me close. His words steadied me, but the weight of the town's whispers lingered, each one a reminder of how small our community was, how quickly gossip spread. That afternoon, I went for a walk, needing air to clear my head. The streets of our town were familiar, lined with maple trees and tidy lawns, but now they felt like a stage where I was the unwitting antagonist. I passed the church where Laura's charity event was set for tomorrow, its signboard announcing the fundraiser in cheerful letters. I imagined her there playing the martyr while Mom nodded along, both of them basking in the sympathy. The thought made my chest tighten, but I kept walking, the hope necklace around my neck, a quiet reminder of the strength I'd found in that dollar. I wasn't the girl who'd beg for their approval anymore. By staying silent, I was choosing myself, even if it meant standing alone against their lies. Back home, I avoided my phone, focusing instead on grading papers, trying to reclaim normalcy. But as night fell, the silence felt fragile, like the hush before a storm. Laura's post had done its damage, turning friends into skeptics, neighbors into judges. I told myself I'd risen above it, that their words couldn't touch me. But deep down, I sensed this was only the beginning. Silence might be golden, but they were plotting something far darker. Laura's public shaming had left a bitter taste, her charity event post painting me as the heartless daughter who'd abandoned her family for $1. I was 34, an English teacher in our small Ohio town, and I'd chosen silence over her drama, hoping to protect the fragile peace I'd found with Tom. But the whispers from friends and the weight of the town's judgment lingered, making every trip to the grocery store feel like a walk through a minefield. I told myself I was done with their games, that my silence was my strength. Yet a month later, a letter arrived that made me question everything. It came on a chilly November afternoon, slipped through our mail slot in a cream-colored envelope, with my name scrawled in Mom's familiar cursive. I stood in our living room, the faint scent of Tom's homemade chili simmering in the kitchen, and tore it open, half expecting another demand or accusation. Instead, I found a handwritten note, its tone softer than I'd ever heard from her. "Sarah, we've made mistakes," it began. "Let's start over. We miss you." Folded inside was a faded photo from my childhood, a snapshot of me, maybe 7 years old, sitting on Dad's lap at a picnic, my hope necklace glinting at my throat. My breath caught. That necklace, a gift from Dad, was the one I'd worn on my wedding day, a symbol of the love I'd once believed in. The letter ended with an invitation to visit their house for dinner, to talk as a family. My heart wavered, a flicker of longing stirring beneath the hurt. I showed the letter to Tom that evening, my hands trembling as I handed him the photo. He read it slowly, his brow furrowed. "This feels too good to be true," he said, his voice cautious but kind. "But if you want to try, I'm with you." I nodded, staring at the photo, my younger self smiling up at Dad. I'd spent years chasing their approval, swallowing their slights to keep the peace. Maybe this was their chance to make things right, to see me as more than Laura's shadow. Against my better judgment, hope crept in, a dangerous, fragile thing. I decided to go alone, to face them without Tom as a buffer. I needed to know if they meant it. The next evening, I drove to my parents' house, a modest brick home on the edge of town where I'd grown up. The familiar creak of the porch steps sent a shiver through me, memories of childhood fights and fleeting moments of warmth mingling in my mind. I clutched the hope necklace under my scarf, its weight grounding me as I knocked. Mom opened the door, her smile warm but oddly rehearsed. "Sarah, you came," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt stiff. Dad stood behind her, his eyes tired but kind, while Laura lingered in the living room, her expression unreadable. The house smelled of roasted chicken, and the dining table was set with care candles flickering softly. For a moment, I let myself believe we could heal, that this dinner was the fresh start I'd dreamed of. But something felt off. As we sat, a stranger appeared, a woman in her 40s with a bright smile, introducing herself as Karen, a community storyteller from the local radio station. "We're so excited to capture this," she said, gesturing to a camera set up in the corner. My stomach dropped. "Capture what?" I asked, my voice tight. Mom's smile widened, too polished. "We thought it'd be special to record our reunion," she said, "to share our story of coming back together. People need to see families heal." Laura chimed in, her voice syrupy. "After all the negativity, this will show the town what we're really about." My heart pounded as I realized the truth. This wasn't a reconciliation. It was a performance, a staged reunion video for social media designed to polish their image after Laura's charity stunt. I sat frozen, the fork heavy in my hand. Karen adjusted the camera, directing us to smile naturally as she asked Mom about family challenges. Mom spoke of misunderstandings, casting herself as the forgiving matriarch, while Laura nodded, playing the dutiful daughter. Dad stayed quiet, his gaze fixed on his plate. I felt like a prop in their narrative, my presence needed only to complete the picture of a healed family. The photo in the letter, the soft words, they weren't for me. They were bait to lure me here, to use my pain for their gain. The betrayal cut deeper than the empty pews, sharper than the postcard's taunt. I stood my chair, scraping the floor, and walked to the door without a word. Mom called after me. "Sarah, don't make a scene," but I didn't look back. The cold night air hit my face as I stepped outside, the hope necklace heavy against my chest. Driving home, I gripped the steering wheel, my silence a shield against their lies. Tom was waiting, his arms open, as I recounted the staged dinner. "You saw through it," he said, his voice steady. "That's what matters." But as I lay awake that night, the camera's red light still flashed in my mind, a reminder of their cruelty. I'd walked away, but something told me this wasn't the end. What if that visit had exposed a hidden threat lurking in the shadows? The sting of that staged reunion dinner still burned, the memory of Mom's rehearsed smile and Laura's calculated charm replaying like a bad dream. I was 34, an English teacher in our quiet Ohio town, and I'd walked away from their charade, choosing silence over their manipulative performance. But the betrayal left me shaken. My hope for reconciliation shattered. Tom's steady presence kept me grounded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my family wasn't done with me. Over the next 2 weeks, their resentment seeped into my life like a slow poison, pushing me to take a stand I'd never dared before. It started with texts, short biting messages that arrived at odd hours. The first came from Mom the day after the dinner. "You embarrassed us, Sarah. Family doesn't walk out." Laura's were sharper, dripping with mockery. "Guess you're too good for us now." Even Tim, my usually silent brother, sent a vague, "Why can't you just try?" Each message chipped away at my resolve, reminding me of years spent swallowing their criticism to keep the peace. I'd stare at my phone, tempted to reply to explain my hurt, but I knew it was futile. They didn't want understanding, they wanted control. By the second week, the texts grew more frequent, Laura's tone turning cruel. "You'll regret acting so high and mighty." I showed Tom each one, his jaw tightening with every word. "They're trying to wear you down," he said, his voice firm. "You don't owe them anything." His words fueled a decision I'd been mulling over since the dinner. I called a locksmith that Friday, my hands steady as I booked the appointment. The next morning, a burly man in overalls arrived, swapping out the locks on our apartment door with a clank and hum of his tools. The new keys gleamed in my palm, a symbol of a boundary I'd never set before. Back inside, I sat at the kitchen table, my phone in hand, and blocked their numbers. Mom, Laura, even Tim. The act felt final, like closing a book I'd read too many times. I expected guilt to flood me, but instead a quiet strength settled in my chest. I wasn't hiding. I was protecting my peace, building a fortress around the life Tom and I were creating. The hope necklace around my neck, a childhood gift from Dad, felt heavier now. A reminder of the girl who'd once craved their approval, and the woman who no longer did. That afternoon, I ran into Mrs. Carter, our neighbor across the street, while checking the mailbox. She was a kind woman in her 60s, always quick with a wave and a story about her grandkids. But today, her face was creased with concern. "Sarah, I don't want to worry you," she said, glancing around, "but I saw someone lingering near your place a few days ago. Looked like your sister Laura, just standing by the curb watching." My stomach twisted. Laura lived an hour away. Why was she here, lurking like a ghost? I thanked Mrs. Carter, my mind racing. Later, Tom and I walked the block, and another neighbor, Mr. Ellis, mentioned seeing a woman matching Laura's description near our apartment the previous week, her car idling for too long. The news unsettled me, but I brushed it off as spite. Laura was angry, I told myself, lashing out after my silence. Still, I couldn't shake the chill of being watched. 2 days later, the mailbox held something worse. Tucked among bills was a plain white envelope, no address, just my name, scrawled in jagged ink I didn't recognize. I opened it in the kitchen, Tom peering over my shoulder. Inside was a single sheet, the words typed in stark black. "You'll regret cutting us off. You're not as untouchable as you think." My breath caught my fingers, trembling as I reread the threat. It was anonymous, but the venom felt familiar, echoing Laura's biting texts. Tom's face hardened. "This isn't a prank, Sarah," he said, urging me to keep it. I folded the letter carefully, tucking it into a drawer with a sense of purpose. This wasn't just a taunt, it was evidence, a tangible piece of their malice. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it, but holding it felt like holding power, a way to turn their cruelty against them. That night I lay awake, the new locks a small comfort against the unease creeping into our home. Tom slept beside me, his steady breathing a reminder I wasn't alone. I thought of Laura, her car idling outside her presence, a shadow over my newfound freedom. The letter's words looped in my mind, not just a threat, but a challenge. I'd changed the locks, blocked their numbers, drawn a line in the sand. But as I stared into the dark, a cold certainty settled over me. That letter wasn't just words. It was the spark for an official confrontation. The threatening letter sat in my kitchen drawer, like a coiled snake, its typed words. "You'll regret cutting us off," etched in my mind. I was 34, an English teacher in our small Ohio town, and the past weeks had hardened my resolve. Changing the locks and blocking my family's numbers had felt like reclaiming my life, but Laura's lurking presence and that menacing note warned me their anger was far from spent. I'd hoped my silence would end their campaign, but a rainy evening 3 days later shattered that illusion, pulling me into a confrontation I never saw coming. It was just past 7 when the doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. Tom and I were in the living room, the TV flickering with a sitcom we weren't really watching. I glanced at him, my pulse quickening. "Who's that?" I muttered, the memory of Laura lingering near our apartment flashing through my mind. Tom shrugged, but his eyes narrowed as he stood to answer. I followed, my bare feet cold on the hardwood. Through the peephole, I saw 2 police officers, their uniforms stark under the porch light. My heart thudded as I opened the door, the new locks clicking smoothly. "Sarah Collins," the older officer asked, his voice calm but firm. I nodded, my throat dry. "We've received a report of possible elder neglect concerning your father, Robert Collins. May we come in?" I stepped aside, my mind racing. Elder neglect. Dad was in his late 60s, healthy as far as I knew, living with Mom in their brick house an hour away. Tom stood close, his hand brushing mine as the officers entered. The second officer, younger with a notepad, explained. "The complaint came from your mother, Ellen, with a supporting statement from a neighbor, Margaret Carter." My stomach dropped. Mrs. Carter, the kind woman who'd warned me about Laura's suspicious behavior. Her signature on this report felt like a betrayal, sharp and personal. I invited the officers to sit, forcing my voice to stay steady. "There's been a mistake," I said, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "My father's fine. I can prove it." I grabbed my laptop from the coffee table, pulling up recent emails from Dad's doctor confirming his clean bill of health from a checkup 2 months ago. I'd insisted on staying in the loop after a scare with his blood pressure years back, and now those records were my lifeline. I showed them photos from a video call last month, Dad laughing, holding up a new fishing rod he'd bought. The older officer, whose badge read Sergeant Daniels, studied the screen, his expression softening. "These look recent," he said, then lowered his voice. "Mrs. Collins, we've seen cases like this. Sometimes reports are filed to settle personal scores, not to protect anyone." His words hung in the air, confirming what I'd feared. Mom's accusation wasn't about Dad's safety, it was about hurting me. I leaned back on the couch, my breath shallow. The younger officer flipped through his notepad. "The complaint claims you've neglected your father's care, refusing financial support," he said. "Your mother mentioned a recent disagreement over money." The $5,000 demand for Laura's birthday flashed in my mind, followed by the single dollar I'd sent in defiance. This was their retaliation, a calculated strike to smear my name. I looked at Tom, his jaw tight, and saw the same realization in his eyes. "My mother asked for money I couldn't give," I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my chest. "I've always helped when I could. This report is a lie." I handed over my phone, showing the officers the blocked numbers, the harassing texts from Mom and Laura before I'd cut them off. "They've been angry since I stopped playing their game," I added. Sergeant Daniels nodded, his gaze steady. "We'll need to verify your father's condition, but this documentation helps," he said. "Off the record, we traced the call to your mother's phone. The neighbor's statement seems coerced. We'll follow up." His tone was measured, but his words carried weight. They knew this wasn't about neglect. It was a weapon wielded to punish me for my defiance. I felt a mix of relief and fury. The hope necklace at my throat, suddenly heavy, a reminder of the family I'd once trusted. Mrs. Carter's involvement stung most. She'd been a friend, someone I'd shared coffee with, yet she'd signed Mom's lie. Had they pressured her, or had she believed their story? As the officers stood to leave, Sergeant Daniels handed me his card. "If anything else comes up, call me," he said. I nodded, clutching the card like a lifeline. Tom saw them out the door, clicking shut behind them. He turned to me, his eyes fierce. "They crossed a line, Sarah," he said. "This isn't just personal anymore." I agreed, but the weight of the accusation pressed down on me. The town was small, and word of a police visit would spread. I imagined Laura's smug smile, Mom's self-righteous nod, thinking they'd won. But as I tucked the threatening letter deeper into the drawer, a new resolve hardened in me. They'd tried to break me, but I'd fight back, smarter, stronger. I sat on the couch, staring at the rain-streaked window, the officer's words echoing. Their confirmation of Mom's motives was a spark igniting a fire I hadn't known I possessed. But the police report was only the tip of a financial iceberg, one that would soon pull me into deeper waters. The police visit had left my small Ohio apartment feeling like a battlefield, the officer's words about my mother's false elder neglect report echoing in my mind. I was 34, an English teacher who'd spent years bending to my family's demands, but their latest attack accusing me of abandoning my father had ignited a fire in me. Sergeant Daniels's quiet confirmation that Mom's call was meant to harm me, coupled with Mrs. Carter's coerced signature, pushed me past fear. The threatening letter in my drawer was no longer just a taunt. It was a weapon, and I was ready to wield it. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. Tom was already up brewing coffee, his steady presence a reminder I wasn't alone. "You're going to the station, aren't you?" he asked, reading my expression. I nodded, pulling on my coat. "They can't just lie to the police and walk away," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. I grabbed the threatening letter and my phone, the screenshots of Mom and Laura's harassing texts preserved like evidence of a crime. The drive to the police station was quiet, the gray November sky mirroring my resolve. I wasn't just Sarah, the overlooked daughter, anymore. I was taking control, turning their attack into my offense. At the station, a small brick building downtown, I met with Sergeant Daniels again. His calm demeanor put me at ease as I explained the false report. "My mother accused me of neglecting my father to punish me," I said, sliding the letter across the desk. "This came a few days ago after I blocked their numbers." He read it carefully, his brow furrowing at the jagged typed words. "You'll regret cutting us off." I showed him the texts, Laura's mockery, Mom's accusations, each one a piece of the puzzle. "I want to file a counter report," I said, my voice firm. "This wasn't about Dad, it was about hurting me." Daniels nodded, pulling up the original complaint on his computer. "We traced the call to your mother's phone," he confirmed, his tone matter of fact. "The neighbor's statement doesn't hold up under scrutiny. Filing a report for false accusation is within your rights." He guided me through the paperwork, each signature feeling like a step toward reclaiming my dignity. As I filled out the forms detailing the timeline from the wedding to the threatening letter, a sense of power washed over me. For years, I'd let Mom and Laura's guilt trips define me, but now I was writing my own story. The report would create an official record, a mark against their lies that they couldn't erase. When I finished, Daniels leaned forward. "This kind of false report can carry fines," he said quietly. "It's not just personal, it's a misuse of the system." His words were a spark fueling my determination. I left the station with a copy of the report, the paper heavy in my hand, a tangible sign that I'd stopped being their victim. Back home, I sat at my laptop, the kitchen quiet except for the hum of the fridge. Tom was at work, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I opened my email, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I needed to let them know I wasn't backing down. I crafted a message, cold and precise, addressed to Mom, Laura, and Tim. "I've filed a police report for your false accusation. It's on record now. Stop contacting me." I attached a scanned copy of the report, my heart pounding as I hit send. The email was a line in the sand, a warning that their actions had consequences. I leaned back, the hope necklace at my throat, a quiet reminder of the strength I'd found. I didn't expect a reply, but I felt unburdened, like I'd shed another layer of their control. Hours later, my phone buzzed with an unblocked number. Laura's work phone, one I hadn't thought to block. The message was frantic. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Sarah, we're struggling and you're making it worse." A second text followed from Mom. "How dare you drag us to the police? We needed that money for Laura's business, not some party." Their words revealed a crack in their facade, desperation, not just anger. Laura's business, a vague venture she'd mentioned once, was failing, and they'd turned to me to fix it as always. But their refusal to apologize, their insistence on blaming me, showed they weren't ready to back down. I deleted the texts, my resolve hardening. Their panic was a sign I'd hit a nerve, but their defiance meant this fight was far from over. That night, Tom came home, his eyes lighting up when I told him about the report and email. "You're not just fighting for you," he said, squeezing my hand. "You're showing them who you are." I smiled, but the weight of their desperation lingered. Mom's mention of Laura's business stuck in my mind, a hint of something bigger than I'd realized. I tucked the police report next to the threatening letter in my drawer, sensing they'd be needed again. Their desperation hid a secret that could destroy my life, and I was only beginning to see its shape. The cold satisfaction of filing the counter-report against my mother's false accusation still lingered, but her frantic texts about Laura's failing business hinted at a deeper motive. I was 34, an English teacher in our small Ohio town, and the fight with my family had shifted from emotional wounds to a battle I was determined to win. The police report and my warning email had rattled them, but their refusal to back down left me uneasy. I sensed their desperation was more than just anger. It was a clue to something bigger, something I hadn't yet uncovered. A week after the police visit, I sat at my desk surrounded by student essays trying to focus on grading. The hope necklace hung at my throat, a quiet reminder of the strength I'd found in standing up to Mom, Laura, and Tim. My laptop pinged with an email from Equifax, a credit monitoring service I'd signed up for years ago after a data breach scare. The subject line made my heart skip. Urgent suspicious activity on your credit report. I opened it, my eyes scanning the alert. An unfamiliar bank account had been opened in my name at a regional bank, linked to a $10,000 loan application. My breath caught. I hadn't opened any accounts recently. Tom and I were still recovering from wedding expenses. The alert included a bank statement snippet showing transactions tied to an organization called Community Hearts. A name I didn't recognize, but that sent a chill down my spine. I called Tom, my voice shaking as I read him the email. "This isn't a mistake, is it?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He was home in minutes, his face grim as he sat beside me. "We need a lawyer, Sarah," he said, his hand steady on mine. "This is serious." I nodded, my mind racing to Laura's charity event and Mom's mention of her failing business. I'd heard whispers of Laura's latest venture, some vague community project she'd pitched to neighbors, but I'd dismissed it as another of her attention-grabbing schemes. Now it felt like a thread I needed to pull. The next morning, I met with Ellen Harper, a local lawyer recommended by a colleague. Her office was small but tidy, with stacks of files and a reassuring air of competence. I handed her the Equifax alert, the threatening letter, and screenshots of the harassing texts explaining the escalating feud, my family's absence at my wedding, the $5,000 demand, the public shaming, and the false police report. Ellen's eyes narrowed as she read the bank statement. "This looks like identity fraud," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We'll request records from the bank and cross-reference them with your sister's activities. That Community Hearts name sounds like a front." She made calls, her efficiency cutting through my anxiety. By afternoon, she had preliminary records. The account was indeed in my name, opened with my social security number, and linked to a series of withdrawals for event expenses under Laura's so-called charity. Ellen dug deeper, contacting the bank and local business registries. What she found made my blood run cold. Community Hearts was registered to Laura, a supposed nonprofit that had collected donations at the church hall event. But most of the funds were funneled to a personal account tied to her failing boutique business. The $10,000 loan applied for in my name was meant to cover her debts with my credit as collateral. If it had gone through, I could have faced wage garnishment or even bankruptcy. "You caught this just in time," Ellen said, her pen tapping the desk. "Another month and you'd be liable for a debt you didn't create." I sat back stunned, the weight of Laura's betrayal sinking in. She hadn't just mocked my dollar or staged a fake reunion, she'd tried to steal my financial future. I drove home in a daze, the lawyer's words echoing. Timely discovery had saved me from legal ruin, but the audacity of Laura's scheme shook me to my core. I thought of the years I'd bailed her out, college fees, car repairs, even her prom dress, while she took and took, never once thanking me. Now she'd used my identity to prop up her lies, risking my home, my job, my life with Tom. I showed him the documents Ellen had emailed, my hands trembling. "She could have destroyed us," I whispered. He pulled me close, his voice fierce. "She didn't, Sarah. You stopped her." His words were a lifeline, but the betrayal cut deeper than ever. I'd fought back with that dollar, with silence, with the police report. But this was a new level of malice. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the Equifax alert still open on my laptop. The hope necklace felt like a mockery now, a relic of a family that had never truly seen me. I was grateful I'd caught the fraud in time, but gratitude was laced with fury. Laura's desperation had driven her to this, and Mom's complicity, her silence, her support made her just as guilty. I knew the next step was a lawsuit, a fight I couldn't avoid. As I stared at the documents, a single thought burned in my mind. If that dollar had saved me from prison, what would the courtroom reveal next? The discovery of Laura's identity fraud, using my name to open a bank account for her failing charity, had shaken me to my core, but it also lit a fire. I was 34, an English teacher in our small Ohio town, and the realization that my sister's actions could have cost me my home and future pushed me past fear. The Equifax alert and my lawyer's investigation had saved me from financial ruin, but I wasn't done. The threatening letter and false police report were weapons in my family's arsenal, and I was ready to turn the law into mine. The next morning, I sat across from Ellen Harper in her tidy office, the stack of documents from the bank and police stations spread before us. Her sharp eyes scanned the papers as I recounted the latest blow, Laura's fake Community Hearts project. The $10,000 loan in my name, Mom's complicity in the false elder neglect report. "We have a strong case," Ellen said, her voice steady. "Identity theft and false reporting are serious. We'll sue for damages and request a formal investigation." I nodded, my resolve hardening. Filing this lawsuit wasn't just about protecting myself. It was about holding them accountable, stripping away their ability to hurt me again. Ellen drafted the complaint citing the unauthorized bank account and the malicious police report, and by noon, we'd filed it at the county courthouse. The weight of the official stamp on the documents felt like a shield, a promise that their lies would face consequences. That evening, my phone buzzed with a call from Mom's landline, one I hadn't blocked. I hesitated, then answered, bracing myself. Her voice was frantic, a stark contrast to her usual sharpness. "Sarah, you can't do this," she pleaded. "A lawsuit. We're family. Drop it and we'll forget everything." Her words were a desperate grab for control, but they lacked sincerity. I pictured her in their living room, pacing beside the old floral couch, her hands wringing. "You accused me of neglecting Dad," I said, my voice cold. "You let Laura use my name to steal. This stops now." She gasped, then her tone shifted to a sob. "We're struggling, Sarah. Laura's business is failing. We needed help." Her plea stirred a flicker of guilt, but I pushed it down. I'd spent years helping only to be betrayed. "You made your choice," I said, and hung up, my heart pounding but unyielding. Hours later, a text came from an unknown number, Laura's. I was sure, bypassing my block. "You'll pay for this, Sarah," it read. "You think you're so smart, but you're nothing." The threat was bold, but it reeked of panic, like a cornered animal lashing out. I forwarded it to Ellen, adding it to our growing file of evidence. Laura's bravado didn't scare me. It fueled me. I'd spent too long shrinking under their judgment, but now I stood firm, the hope necklace at my throat, a quiet reminder of the strength I'd earned. Tom came home, his eyes lighting up when I told him about the lawsuit. "You're not just fighting back," he said, pulling me close. "You're winning." His words were a balm, but I knew the battle was just beginning. The next day, Ellen called with news that shifted the ground beneath me. The police, prompted by our lawsuit, had expanded their investigation into Laura's Community Hearts project. They'd uncovered more than just my case. Laura had solicited donations from neighbors and local businesses, promising to fund community programs that never materialized. The money instead went to her boutique's debts, a pattern of fraud spanning months. A local reporter had caught wind, and a small article appeared in the town paper hinting at questionable financial practices by a resident. The piece didn't name Laura yet, but the whispers were spreading. I walked past the coffee shop downtown and overheard two women murmuring about that charity scam, their glances darting my way. The town was small and news traveled fast. Laura's carefully crafted image was cracking, and I felt a grim satisfaction knowing the truth was clawing its way out. I met Ellen again that afternoon, her office now a war room of legal papers. She showed me the police findings, bank records, witness statements from neighbors who'd donated, even a complaint from the church hall manager about unpaid rental fees for Laura's fundraiser. "This isn't just about you anymore," Ellen said, her pen tapping the desk. "Laura's defrauded multiple people. The police are building a case, and your lawsuit is the catalyst." I sat back stunned. My fight had started as a way to protect myself, but it was unraveling a web of deceit I hadn't imagined. The media attention, though small now, was growing, with a local TV station requesting an interview about community fraud. I declined, wanting to stay focused, but the spotlight on Laura felt like justice taking root. As I drove home, the weight of the lawsuit settled over me, not as a burden, but as a purpose. Mom's begging and Laura's threats showed their fear, but their refusal to back down told me they were hiding more. I gripped the steering wheel, the hope necklace glinting in the rearview mirror. The law wasn't just my weapon, it was about to expose their entire web, and I was ready to see it fall. The lawsuit had set my family's web of lies trembling, with Laura's fraudulent charity exposed, and local headlines whispering of scandal. I was 34, an English teacher in our small Ohio town, and the fight I'd started to protect myself had grown into something bigger, unmasking my sister's deceit to the community. Mom's desperate pleas and Laura's threats only hardened my resolve, but as the court date loomed, a mix of anticipation and dread settled in my chest. This wasn't just about justice, it was about proving to myself that I could stand tall against their years of manipulation. The morning of the hearing, I stood in the courthouse hallway, the marble floor cold beneath my shoes. Ellen Harper. My lawyer adjusted her briefcase, her calm presence anchoring me. Tom squeezed my hand, his eyes steady. "You've got this, Sarah," he whispered. I nodded, the hope necklace at my throat, a quiet reminder of the strength I'd earned. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension, the wooden benches filled with a few reporters and curious neighbors. Mom, Laura, and their lawyer sat across the aisle. Mom's face pale, Laura's jaw set in defiance. Dad wasn't there, his absence a familiar ache. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair, called the session to order, and my heart pounded as Ellen began laying out the charges: identity theft for the bank account Laura opened in my name, and false reporting for Mom's elder neglect accusation. Laura's lawyer, a slick man in a pinstripe suit, stood first, his voice smooth. My clients were desperate. "Your Honor," he said, gesturing to Mom and Laura. They sought attention, not harm. Sarah's overreacted to family misunderstandings. Mom nodded, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, while Laura stared at me, her expression a mix of pity and scorn. Their performance was polished, designed to paint me as the unreasonable daughter blowing a spat out of proportion. I felt the weight of the courtroom's eyes, whispers rippling through the spectators. For a moment, doubt crept in, had I gone too far? But I pushed it aside, focusing on Ellen's steady voice as she countered, presenting the Equifax alert bank records and the threatening letter as evidence of deliberate malice. I took the stand, my hands clasped to hide their trembling. Ellen asked me to recount the events, and I spoke clearly, detailing the wedding snub, the $5,000 demand, and the public shaming. When she asked about the false report, I described the police visit, my voice steady despite the memory of betrayal. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Ellen held up my phone, connected to a small speaker. "Your Honor, we have a recording from a call received after the threatening letter," she said. My heart raced as she played it. Laura's voice crackled through, sharp and unfiltered. "You think you can humiliate us? Sarah, that police report was nothing. Keep pushing and you'll see what we can do." The courtroom fell silent, the weight of her admission hanging heavy. I glanced at Laura, her face blanching, her lawyer frozen. Mom's tissue dropped to her lap, her eyes wide with shock. Ellen paused the recording, letting Laura's words linger. "This confirms the intent to slander and intimidate," she said. The judge's expression hardened, her pen scratching notes. I stepped down my legs shaky, but my spirit unbowed. For years I'd shrunk under their accusations, but now, presenting evidence silently, I felt a quiet power. I wasn't just fighting for me, I was dismantling their lies piece by piece. The spectators murmured the reporters scribbling furiously. Laura's lawyer tried to recover, claiming the call was emotional venting, but the judge cut him off. "I've heard enough," she said, her voice like steel. She ruled in my favor, imposing a $5,000 fine on Laura for identity theft and $2,000 on Mom for the false report, both to be recorded publicly. "This court does not tolerate malicious deception," she declared, her gavel striking with finality. The courtroom erupted in whispers, the reporters' pens flying. Laura stared at the floor, her defiance crumbling, while Mom clutched her arm, whispering frantically. I met Tom's eyes across the room, his nod a silent cheer. I'd grown through this confrontation not just as a victim seeking justice, but as a woman who'd reclaimed her voice. The fines were a small victory, but the public record was a scar. They couldn't erase a mark on their reputation in our tight-knit town. As we left the courtroom, Ellen squeezed my shoulder. "You did it, Sarah," she said. I smiled, but a weight lingered. The victory was mine, but the cost of their betrayal still ached. As I stepped into the sunlight, the hope necklace glinted, a symbol of my resilience. But one letter from the past would change my heart forever. The courtroom victory had left me standing taller, the judge's gavel echoing like a declaration of my freedom. I was 34, an English teacher in our small Ohio town, and exposing Laura's fraud and Mom's false report had shifted the town's whispers from judgment to curiosity. Yet the triumph was bittersweet. Dad's absence at the trial. His silence through the ordeal lingered like an unanswered question. 3 weeks later, as winter tightened its grip, a letter arrived that would unravel the final thread of my family's betrayal, reshaping the pain I'd carried for years. It was a quiet Saturday morning, the kind where frost laced the windows, and the world felt still. Tom was at the hardware store, leaving me alone in our apartment, sorting through a stack of mail. Among the bills was a plain envelope, my name written in Dad's shaky scrawl. My heart stuttered. I hadn't heard from him since the fake reunion dinner, his tired eyes haunting me. I tore it open, expecting another plea or excuse, but instead found a single page, its edges worn, and 2 items tucked inside a faded dollar bill and a small photo. The photo was from my 10th birthday, me grinning, the hope necklace gleaming at my throat. Dad's arm around me, his rare smile warm and genuine. My fingers traced the necklace I still wore, a lump rising in my throat as I began to read. "Sarah," the letter began. "I'm sorry. I'm sick, and I don't know how much time I have." My breath caught sick. He'd been healthy months ago or so, I'd thought. His words were halting, raw, as if each one cost him. He wrote of a cancer diagnosis kept secret by Mom and Laura, and his regret for staying silent through their schemes. "I tried to send you money," he wrote, "savings I'd set aside for you after the wedding. Your mother and Laura stopped me, said it would spoil you. I was weak, afraid of being alone." My eyes stung as I read on. He'd wanted to attend my wedding to celebrate me, but Mom's insistence on Laura's birthday party and their control over his finances left him powerless. The dollar bill, he explained, was the one I'd sent, the one they'd mocked. He'd kept it a symbol of my strength and now returned it with his truth. I sank onto the couch, the letter trembling in my hands. The dollar bill, creased and worn, felt heavier than gold. I pictured Dad, his quiet demeanor always overshadowed by Mom's sharpness, and Laura's demands, trying to reach out to me only to be silenced. The photo brought back that birthday, a rare day when he'd been fully present, slipping the hope necklace around my neck and calling me his dreamer. I'd clung to that memory through years of their favoritism, hoping it meant he saw me. Now his words confirmed it, he'd seen me, but fear of isolation had trapped him. Tears fell not from anger, but from a deep, aching empathy. He wasn't blameless, but he was human, caught in the same web of manipulation I'd fought to escape. I reread the letter, each word a revelation. Dad's confession about the savings stunned me. How much had they hidden from him from me? His illness added a layer of urgency, a reminder of time slipping away. I wanted to call him to hear his voice, but the letter ended with a request. Don't come. They'll make it harder. Just know I love you. The words broke something open in me, a mix of grief and relief. He'd been coerced, not indifferent, and that truth shifted the weight I'd carried. I tucked the photo and dollar bill into my pocket, the necklace warm against my skin. I wasn't ready to forgive, not fully, but his honesty cracked the armor I'd built around my heart. When Tom came home, I showed him the letter, my voice catching as I read aloud. His eyes softened, but his jaw tightened at the mention of Mom and Laura's control. He's trying to make things right. Tom set his hand on mine. But they kept him from you. I nodded, the pain of their betrayal mingling with sorrow for Dad's isolation. I thought of the courtroom, Laura's smug defiance, Mom's crocodile tears. They'd manipulated him as they had me, but I'd broken free, and now Dad was trying to in his own way. I resolved to keep the letter safe, a piece of him I could hold on to, even if I couldn't see him. That night, I sat by the window, the town quiet under a blanket of snow. The hope necklace glinted in the dim light, no longer just a symbol of lost dreams, but of truth reclaimed. Dad's letter had shocked me not with anger, but with empathy, a twist I hadn't expected. I could feel the pull of forgiveness, a chance to heal the wounds of years. But as I folded the letter, a shadow loomed. Dad's illness meant time was running out. Forgiveness might heal, but death was looming on the horizon. Dad's letter, with its raw confession and the returned dollar bill, had shifted something deep within me, softening the edges of my anger with a mix of empathy and sorrow. I was 34, an English teacher in our small Ohio town, and his words revealing his illness and his coercion by Mom and Laura had given me a glimpse of the father who'd once called me his dreamer. Yet his plea to stay away, to protect me from their control, left me grappling with a grief I couldn't fully name. 5 weeks later, as winter blanketed our town in snow, a call came that would force me to confront the final chapter of our broken family, bringing a closure I hadn't expected. It was a Tuesday morning in late December, the kind where the air bit at your fingers and the world seemed hushed under a gray sky. I was at the kitchen table sipping tea and marking student essays, the hope necklace resting beside my mug, its silver chain catching the pale light. The phone rang, shattering the quiet. It was Jenny, a high school friend who'd stayed loyal through the town's gossip about my family's scandal. Her voice was gentle, trembling. "Sarah, I'm so sorry," she said. "Your dad passed last night. The cancer was worse than anyone knew, and his heart gave out." The words landed like a quiet explosion, stealing my breath. I'd known he was sick, but I'd held onto a fragile hope that there was time to see him, to hear his voice, to bridge the gap his letter had opened. I thanked Jenny, my voice barely a whisper, and hung up my hands, shaking as I clutched the necklace. Tears came not in a rush, but in a slow, steady stream, each one carrying years of unspoken love and loss. Tom found me there, still at the table, the essays untouched. I told him about Dad, my words halting, and he knelt beside me, his arms a steady anchor. "I should have gone to him," I said, guilt clawing at me. "He asked you to stay away to protect you." Tom replied, his voice soft but firm. "You honored that." I nodded, but the ache was relentless. I thought of Dad's letter, the dollar bill, the photo of us from my 10th birthday, moments when I'd felt his love, fleeting but real. His absence at the trial, his silence through Mom and Laura's schemes had hurt, but now I saw it for what it was. A man trapped too weak to fight their control, but loving me in the only way he could. A few days later, a call came from Mr. Thompson, Dad's lawyer, a reserved man with a kind voice. He asked me to meet at his office to review Dad's will, assuring me Mom and Laura wouldn't be there. I drove downtown, the streets glittering with Christmas decorations that felt hollow against my grief. Mr. Thompson's office was small, cluttered with files, but warm with the scent of old books. He handed me a sealed envelope, my name written in Dad's familiar scrawl. Inside was his will, a single page that stopped my heart. To Sarah, my daughter, it read, whose courage showed me what I should have been. I leave you my love and my pride. You've always been enough. There was no inheritance. Mom and Laura had bled his savings dry, but his words were a treasure, a validation I'd craved my whole life. I traced the ink tears falling and thanked Mr. Thompson, my voice thick. Dad had seen my strength even when I doubted it, and that knowledge was a light in the darkness of his loss. That evening, Jenny called again, her voice carrying a mix of sympathy and gossip. "You won't believe this, Sarah," she said. "Your mom and Laura are gone. They put the house up for sale and left town yesterday." The news hit me like a gust of cold wind. The community, once charmed by Laura's charisma, had turned on them after the lawsuit's public records, and local news exposed her fraudulent community heart scheme. Neighbors who'd donated felt betrayed, and the church hall, once a stage for Laura's lies, had banned her from future events. Jenny mentioned a post Laura had made online, a weak attempt at an apology. "I made mistakes, but I'm moving forward to heal." It was met with silence, the comments disabled after locals flooded it with accusations of deceit. "No one's buying it," Jenny said. "The town's done with them." I pictured Mom's tight-lipped frown, Laura's defiant glare, as they packed their lives into boxes shunned by the community they'd manipulated for years. I sat on our couch that night, Dad's will beside the dollar bill and the photo from his letter. The town's rejection of Mom and Laura was a quiet justice, but it didn't spark the vindication I'd once imagined. They'd lost everything: their home, their reputation, their place in a town that no longer trusted them. I thought of the years I'd poured into their demands, money for Laura's ventures, sacrifices for Mom's approval, only to be met with betrayal. Now their downfall felt heavier than my own pain. They'd taken so much from me, but in leaving, they'd lost more than I ever did. I turned to Tom, his steady presence a constant in the storm. "I don't need to chase them anymore," I said, my voice soft but certain. "They've paid their price." He nodded, his hand finding mine. "You're bigger than their games," he said, his words wrapping around me like a promise. I walked to the window, the snow falling in thick, silent flakes blanketing the town in a hush. The hope necklace lay in my hand, its weight no longer a reminder of lost dreams, but of the woman I'd become. Dad's will had given me closure, his words a final gift that healed wounds I'd carried too long. I thought of the empty pews at my wedding, Laura's cruel postcard, Mom's false accusations, all moments that had pushed me to fight, to stand up, to let go. I didn't need revenge. Their exile was their own doing, a consequence of the lies they'd built their lives on. As I watched the snow, a peace settled over me, not because they were gone, but because I'd chosen to release their hold. Yet in that loss, I found something priceless, waiting, a gift I was only beginning to name. Dad's passing, and the departure of Mom and Laura from our small Ohio town had left a quiet void, their absence a bittersweet release after years of their betrayal. I was 34, an English teacher who'd fought through their lies, skipping my wedding, demanding money, forging my identity, and emerged with a hard-won sense of self. Dad's will, praising my strength, had been a final gift, easing the ache of his loss. As winter melted into the tentative warmth of early spring, I felt a pull to anchor my journey, to transform the pain into something enduring, a testament to the peace I'd found. On a crisp February morning, I sat at our kitchen table, the dollar bill and hope necklace laid out before me. The bill, creased and worn from Dad's letter, was the one I'd sent in defiance of Mom's $5,000 demand for Laura's birthday, a single dollar that had sparked a revolution in my heart. The necklace, a delicate silver chain Dad gave me at 10, had once symbolized my desperate wish for their love, then my resilience through their cruelty. Now they stood as twin pillars of my self-respect, markers of a path I'd carved through years of neglect. I'd spent my life bending to their expectations, paying for Laura's whims, swallowing Mom's guilt trips, hoping for scraps of affection, but that dollar, that necklace were proof I'd broken free. I decided to frame them to make them a daily reminder of the woman I'd become, one who valued herself above their judgment. I drove to a craft shop downtown, the streets of our town stirring with the first signs of spring buds on trees, children biking past. The shop smelled of wood and paint, and I chose a simple oak frame, its grain warm and unpretentious. The clerk, a woman with kind eyes, helped me select a soft beige mat to complement it. Back home, I worked with care, placing the dollar bill beside the necklace, their simplicity striking against the mat's clean lines. Below, I inscribed in steady handwriting, "Peace cost me $1, and everything else I didn't need." The words were a quiet vow capturing the cost of my freedom, not just the dollar, but the years of self-doubt, the sacrifices I'd made for a family that never saw me. I hung the frame above our fireplace, its presence a beacon in our living room. Tom came home, his gaze settling on the frame, and a slow smile spread across his face. "That's powerful, Sarah," he said, his voice thick with pride. "It's you through and through." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words, the frame a monument to a journey I'd never imagined I'd take. As I stood before it, my thoughts turned to the lessons my family had taught me, not through kindness, but through their absence. Mom's sharp demands, her accusations of selfishness, had shown me the danger of living for others' approval. I remembered the nights I'd stayed up balancing my checkbook to send money for Laura's needs, her college laptop, her prom dress, only to be met with silence or criticism. Her voice, laced with guilt, had once held me captive, but now I saw it for what it was, a tool to keep me small. Laura's entitlement, her fraudulent charity that nearly ruined me, revealed the cost of envy and deceit. I pictured her charming smile at the church hall collecting donations while plotting to use my identity, her confidence a mask for desperation. Even Dad, with his quiet love buried under fear, had taught me to fight for my voice. His letter confessing his coercion showed me the price of silence, the isolation he'd endured to avoid Mom's wrath. Together, they'd shaped me not into the daughter they wanted, but into a woman who refused to be defined by their flaws. That realization stirred a deep gratitude not for their actions, but for the clarity they'd forced upon me. Their betrayal had been a brutal teacher carving out the shape of who I would not become, bitter, manipulative, or chained to resentment. Instead, I'd learned to value my own heart, to build a life with Tom that was honest and whole. The hope necklace, once a symbol of my longing for their love, now gleamed with my own strength, a reminder that hope was mine to define. I thought of the moments I'd doubted myself, the empty pews at my wedding, the sting of Laura's public shaming, the fear of that threatening letter. Each had pushed me to fight, to stand taller, to choose myself. Gratitude welled up, not for the pain, but for the woman it had forged, one who could look at that dollar and necklace and see victory, not loss. That gratitude pushed me to look beyond my own story. I thought of others who'd faced similar betrayals, people manipulated by those they trusted, silenced by guilt, or stripped of their agency. I wanted to offer them the strength I'd found, to show them they could reclaim their lives. I contacted a local women's center, a nonprofit I'd read about in the town paper known for helping victims of emotional and financial abuse. On a chilly March afternoon, I met with Clara, the director, in a cozy office filled with plants and soft chairs. I shared my journey, not the lawsuit's details or Laura's fraud, but the weight of years spent pleasing a family that dismissed me, the liberation of breaking free. Clara's eyes lit up. "You'd be a gift to our peer support group," she said. "Your story could show others they're not alone." I signed up to volunteer, committing to weekly meetings where I'd listen, share, and guide women through their own battles. My first session at the center was overwhelming. The room filled with women whose faces mirrored my own, worn, guarded, but searching for hope. I spoke of my dollar bill, how it became a rebellion against years of being the family's scapegoat. I shared how the necklace, once a plea for love, became a symbol of my worth. A woman named Maria, her hands twisting nervously, told of a sister who'd drained her savings, leaving her with shame and debt. I listened, offering quiet encouragement, and felt a purpose take root. Each week, I returned sharing stories of my own healing, celebrating small victories with women who were finding their voices. Linda, another member, spoke of leaving an abusive family, her eyes bright with newfound courage. Helping them wasn't just about giving advice, it was about building a community of resilience, a place where pain could transform into strength. The center became my sanctuary, a space where my scars found meaning, where my gratitude deepened with every shared story. At home, I'd sit by the fireplace, the framed dollar and necklace glowing in the evening light. The inscription, "Peace cost me $1 and everything else I didn't need," felt like a sacred promise, a reminder that my peace was earned through courage not given by those who'd hurt me. I thought of Mom and Laura, now shadows in a town that had rejected their lies. Their absence was a freedom I hadn't anticipated a chance to live without their judgment. Tom joined me one evening, his arm around me, as we gazed at the frame. "You turned their chaos into something beautiful," he said, his voice steady. I nodded, tears pricking my eyes, not from grief, but from the fullness of what I'd gained. As spring bloomed, I walked through our town, the streets alive with new green. The whispers about my family had faded, replaced by nods of respect from neighbors who'd seen my strength. The hope necklace tucked under my shirt was a quiet companion, its meaning wholly mine. My family had taught me what not to be cruel, entitled, afraid, and in that lesson, I'd found gratitude for the life I'd built. Volunteering at the center, I saw my pain reflected in others, but also their resilience, their hope. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving my life, a testament to the power of letting go. The dollar and necklace framed above the fireplace were my anchors, proof that peace was worth every battle. The framed dollar bill and hope necklace above our fireplace had become my touchstone, a quiet testament to the self-respect I'd fought for through years of family betrayal. I was 34, an English teacher in our small Ohio town, and the spring of my first year married to Tom was unfolding with a warmth I hadn't known in years. Mom and Laura's departure, driven out by the town's rejection after their lies were exposed, had left a stillness in my life. Volunteering at the Women's Center had given my pain purpose, transforming it into a beacon for others. Yet as the days grew longer and the world bloomed anew, I felt a need to close this chapter fully, to reflect on what I'd gained and share its truth, not just with myself, but with anyone who might hear my story. One April morning, I woke to the sound of birds outside our window, their chatter a soft reminder of life moving forward. I stood before the frame, the inscription, "Peace cost me $1, and everything else I didn't need," glinting in the early light. The dollar bill, once a defiant jab at Mom's greed, now symbolized my refusal to be defined by their demands. The necklace, a gift from Dad when I was a child, had evolved from a symbol of longing to one of resilience, its silver chain a thread connecting the girl I'd been to the woman I'd become. I traced my fingers over the frame, feeling a quiet certainty settle in me. My family's betrayal, the empty pews at my wedding. Laura's fraud. Mom's accusations had been a crucible forging a strength I hadn't known I possessed. But it was more than survival. It was a reclamation of my life, a choice to live for myself, not their shadows. I thought of the women at the center, their stories echoing mine. There was Maria, who'd rebuilt her life after her brother's betrayal, and Linda, who'd found the courage to walk away from a toxic family. Each week I sat with them, listening to their pain, sharing my own, and celebrating their small victories. A new job a day without fear, a moment of self-worth. Their resilience mirrored mine, and in their eyes I saw the truth. Healing wasn't about erasing the past, but about building something new from its ashes. My family had taught me what not to be cruel, entitled, manipulative, and in that harsh lesson I'd found a gratitude that surprised me. I was thankful not for their actions, but for the clarity they'd given me. They'd shown me the cost of living for others' approval, and in rejecting that I'd discovered a life rooted in authenticity, love, and purpose. That afternoon, I walked through our town, the streets vibrant with spring flowers and children playing in the park. The whispers about Mom and Laura had faded, replaced by nods of respect from neighbors who'd seen my journey unfold. At the grocery store, Mrs. Carter, the neighbor who'd once signed Mom's false report, approached me, her eyes apologetic. "I was wrong, Sarah," she said softly. "I believed their lies. You didn't deserve any of it." I nodded, offering a small smile. Her words didn't erase the hurt, but they confirmed what I'd learned. The truth had a way of rising no matter how deeply buried. I didn't need her approval, just as I no longer needed my family's. My peace was mine, earned through battles fought and won. Back home, I sat at my desk, grading essays with a focus I hadn't had in years. The hope necklace rested around my neck, its weight a quiet comfort. I thought of Dad, his final letter, and Will praising my strength, and felt a pang of love tinged with sorrow. His absence was a wound that would never fully heal, but his words had given me closure, a bridge between the father I'd loved and the family I'd left behind. I realized that my journey wasn't just about me, it was a story worth sharing, a testament to the power of standing up, of choosing yourself. I wanted others to hear it, to find hope in their own struggles. If I could turn my pain into purpose, so could they. So here I am sharing this with you wherever you're watching or listening. My story began with $1 and a necklace, but it's really about finding peace in a world that tried to break me. If you've been betrayed, manipulated, or made to feel less than, know this: you are enough. Your strength is waiting, just as mine was, in the moments you choose yourself. I'm sharing this because I believe stories like mine can light the way for others, and I'd love for you to join me in this journey. Subscribe to this channel. Share your thoughts in the comments. What did my story stir in you? Have you faced a moment where you had to stand up to let go of what didn't serve you? Your voices matter, and I want to hear them. Let's build a community of resilience where we lift each other up, where we turn pain into purpose. I think of the women at the center, their courage inspiring me as much as I hope to inspire them. One evening after a session, Maria pulled me aside, her eyes bright. "You gave me hope, Sarah," she said. "I'm starting to believe I can move forward." Her words were a mirror reflecting the gift of this work. Volunteering had become more than a commitment. It was a calling, a way to honor the lessons my family had unwittingly taught me. I'd learned to value my own heart, to see my worth beyond their rejection. Mom's demands had shown me the emptiness of living for others' praise. Laura's schemes had revealed the fragility of a life built on lies. Dad's quiet love, though flawed, had reminded me that even broken bonds could leave gifts behind. As I stood in our living room that night, the frame above the fireplace glowed in the soft light. The dollar bill and necklace, simple objects, held the weight of my story. A story of betrayal. Yes, but also of triumph. The inscription, "Peace cost me $1, and everything else I didn't need," was my truth. A reminder that peace wasn't found in their approval, but in letting go of everything that held me back. I thought of the town now, a place of warmth rather than judgment, and of Tom, my constant through every storm. His love had been my anchor, his belief in me a light when I couldn't see my own. I walked outside, the spring air soft against my skin, the stars bright above our quiet town. The hope necklace rested at my throat, no longer a plea, but a promise to myself, to the women I helped, to anyone who heard my story. My family's betrayal had been a fire, but I'd walked through it, emerging not burned, but refined. I was grateful not for their pain, but for the life it had led me to, a life of purpose, love, and unshakable self-respect. As I looked up at the sky, I knew this was my peace, hard-won and wholly mine. So, to you watching, I ask, what's your dollar, your moment of defiance? Share it below, subscribe, and let's keep this conversation going. Together, we can find the peace that costs everything and nothing at all.